The wind didn't just blow in Wyoming. It howled. It was a living thing, a voracious beast that tore through the canyons and screamed over the peaks of the Grand Tetons, searching for anything foolish enough to be caught in its path. Elara Vance was beginning to realize, with a sinking feeling in her gut, that she was exactly that kind of fool. The rental car, a sleek sedan that had felt so luxurious and capable in the parking garage at Jackson Hole Airport, now felt like a tin can sliding across a sheet of glass. The GPS on her dashboard had been spinning in circles for the last 20 minutes, searching for a satellite signal that simply wasn't there. Elara gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white, her eyes straining against the hypnotic swirl of the snow. She was an architect, a woman who built her life on straight lines, precise measurements, and predictable outcomes. She designed skyscrapers in Chicago that defied the wind, but out here, in this raw, untamed wilderness, nature was laughing at her. She was supposed to be scouting a location for the new Summit Luxury Retreat, a project that would define her career. It was supposed to be a quick drive out to the property line, a few photos, and back to the hotel for a hot shower and room service. But the weather report had been wrong. Or perhaps she had just been too arrogant to listen to the old man at the gas station who warned her about the pass. The world outside was vanishing. Majestic mountains she had admired an hour ago were gone, swallowed by a wall of white. The heater in the car was blasting, but she could feel the cold seeping through the glass, creeping numbness that settled into her bones. Then it happened. A patch of black ice, invisible and unforgiving. The car didn't just slide, it pirouetted. The world spun in a dizzying blur of white and gray. Elara gasped, slamming on the brakes, which only made it worse. The car drifted sideways, leaving the pavement entirely, and crunched sickeningly into a deep snowbank at the edge of the timberline. The engine sputtered, coughed once, and died. Silence. Absolute, terrifying silence. Elara sat there for a moment, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She turned the key. Nothing. Just the hollow click of a dead connection. She reached for her phone. No service. The words on the screen mocked her. She was alone, miles from the nearest town, in a dress that cost more than most people's cars, but offered zero protection against sub-zero temperatures. Panic began to rise in her throat, sour and sharp. She opened the door, and the wind instantly ripped it from her hand, slamming it against the snowbank. Cold hit her like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs. She stepped out, her high-heeled leather boots sinking instantly into 2 feet of powder. "Hello?" She screamed, but the wind swallowed her voice instantly. She looked around, desperate for a light, a house, anything. But there was only the endless swirling white and the dark looming shapes of the pine trees. She scrambled back into the car, pulling her wool coat tighter around herself. She knew enough about survival stories to know that staying with the vehicle was the #1 rule. But as the minutes turned into an hour, and the temperature inside the car began to plummet to match the freezing air outside, Elara realized that staying here might just be a frozen tomb. She closed her eyes, fighting back tears of frustration and fear. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. Not here. Not like this. Suddenly, a sound cut through the wind. It wasn't the howl of a wolf or the crack of a branch. It was a rhythmic, heavy thudding. A heartbeat in the snow. She wiped the condensation from the window and peered out. Shape was emerging from the white mist. Massive, dark, a horse. and on its back a figure that looked like it had been carved from the mountain itself. Silas Thorne didn't like checking the perimeter fences in a blizzard, but he liked stray cattle even less. He had been riding Atlas, his black quarter horse, for 2 hours. His eyes squinted against the stinging ice crystals. He knew this land better than he knew the lines on his own palm. He knew where the drifts piled up and where the wind cut through. He saw the car before he saw the woman. A flash of metallic silver that didn't belong in the organic palette of the forest. He pulled Atlas up, the horse snorting steam into the frigid air. "Easy, boy," Silas murmured, his voice rough from disuse. He nudged the horse forward, peering through the gloom. City folk. It was always city folk. He saw the movement inside the car and dismounted, his boots crunching heavily in the snow. He walked to the driver's side and yanked the door open. The woman inside looked up at him with wide, terrified eyes. She was shivering so violently her teeth were chattering. She looked like a porcelain doll that had been dropped in the mud, fragile, out of place, and entirely unprepared. "You trying to freeze to death? Or did you just park here for the view?" Silas asked, his voice deep and devoid of sympathy. He wasn't being cruel. He was just practical. When Wyoming, sympathy didn't keep you warm. Elara stared at him. He was tall, terrifyingly so, with a duster coat covered in snow and a cowboy hat pulled low over eyes that were the color of slate. I skidded," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "A car, ... it won't start." Silas looked at the car, then back at her. "Engine's probably cracked the block if you ran it too hard, or the battery's dead from the cold. Either way, this thing isn't moving until spring." He reached out a gloved hand. "Come on." Elara hesitated. "Come on where? I can't just leave the car." Silas let out a short, impatient breath. "Ma'am, the temperature is going to drop another 20 degrees tonight. If you stay in this tin can, I'll be digging your frozen body out in the morning. Now, take my hand." The bluntness of his words shocked her into action. She took his hand. His grip was iron strong, pulling her out of the snowbank as if she weighed nothing. He led her to the horse. "Can you ride?" he asked. "No. I've never been on a horse in my life," Elara protested, eyeing the massive animal with fear. Silas shook his head, muttering something about tourists under his breath. "Put your foot in the stirrup, grab the horn, swing up." He practically lifted her into the saddle. The horse shifted, and Elara gasped, clutching the leather pommel. Silas swung up behind her in one fluid motion. He reached around her to grab the reins, and for a moment she was completely encompassed by him, the smell of wet wool, leather, wood smoke, and something distinctly masculine. "Lean back," he ordered, "and don't scream." Atlas hates it when people scream. The ride back to his ranch was a blur of terror and strange comfort. The wind continued to rage, but with Silas's broad chest acting as a shield behind her, Elara felt a strange sense of safety. She could feel the heat radiating from him, a stark contrast to the biting cold. They rode for what felt like hours, though it was likely only 30 minutes. Finally, a warm yellow light appeared in the distance. A cabin built of heavy logs, with smoke pouring from a stone chimney. It looked like a beacon of hope in the endless gray. Silas guided the horse into a barn, the sudden break from the wind making Elara's ears pop. He helped her down, her legs wobbling so badly she almost collapsed. He caught her, his hands steadying her by the elbows. For a second, they stood close, her face inches from his chest. She looked up, finally seeing his face clearly in the dim light of the barn. He had a scar running along his jawline, and his face was weathered by the sun and wind. But he was undeniably handsome in a rough, dangerous way. "Go inside," he said, nodding toward the cabin. "Doors unlocked? Start getting warm? I gotta tend to the horse." Elara nodded, too cold to argue. She stumbled across the snowy yard and into the cabin. The heat hit her instantly. A fire was already banked in the massive stone hearth. The room was simple, filled with books, leather furniture, and the scent of pine. She collapsed onto the rug in front of the fire, her shivering slowly beginning to subside. She looked around. No TV, no computer, just walls of books and a guitar in the corner. It was a monk's existence. The door opened, and Silas entered, shaking the snow from his coat. He looked at her, huddled on his floor in her expensive designer coat. "You hungry?" he asked, moving to a small kitchen area. "Yes," she whispered. He nodded and started pulling cast-iron pans from a hook. "Beans and cornbread. It ain't the Ritz, but it's hot." Elara watched him move. He was efficient, every movement calculated. He wasn't clumsy, despite his size. There was a grace to him, the grace of a predator or a protector. Over the next 2 days, the storm raged on, trapping them in a cocoon of white. Elara, stripped of her technology and her schedule, felt like she was going through withdrawal. She paced the small cabin, looking out the windows at the impenetrable wall of snow. Silas, on the other hand, seemed perfectly content. He read books by the fire, mended leather tack, and watched her with quiet amusement. "You move too much," he said on the second evening, looking up from a book on geology. "You're wasting energy." Elara stopped pacing and glared at him. "I'm not wasting energy. I'm thinking. I have deadlines, Silas. I have a team waiting for my report. I have a life." Silas closed his book. "You have a storm," he corrected gently. "And until the storm is done with you, you aren't going anywhere." "How can you stand it?" she asked, gesturing to the silence. "The quiet? The isolation? Doesn't it drive you crazy?" Silas stood up and walked to the window, looking out into the darkness. "The city's what's crazy, Elara. All that noise. All those people running around trying to be important. Out here you can hear yourself think. Sometimes that's the scariest thing of all." His words struck a chord in her. She realized she hadn't heard herself think in years. Her mind was always full of notifications, emails, and blueprints. That night, the power went out. The cabin was plunged into darkness, lit only by the flickering firelight. The silence deepened. Elara sat on the sofa, pulling a blanket around her. Silas sat in the armchair opposite her, whittling a piece of cedar. "What were you doing out there anyway?" he asked softly. "Surveying," she admitted. "For the new resort, the Summit Retreat." Ises's hand paused on the wood. He looked up, his eyes hardening. "The one they want to build on the ridge. It's the one that cuts off the elk migration route." Elara felt defensive. "It's a sustainable development. We're using eco-friendly materials." "Eco-friendly," Silas scoffed, a bitter edge to his laugh. "You pour concrete over a meadow, put up glass walls so birds break their necks, and call it eco-friendly because you use recycled bamboo for the floors. You city people, you love nature as long as you can watch it from behind a window with a glass of wine." "That's not fair," Elara argued, though her voice lacked conviction. "People need places to escape. To see this beauty." Silas leaned forward, the firelight dancing in his eyes. "If you pave it, it ain't beauty anymore. It's just scenery." There's a difference. The argument hung in the air, heavy and unresolved. But strangely, The tension wasn't hostile, it was passionate. The next morning, the snow had stopped falling, but the drifts were 5 feet high. Silas was gearing up to go out. "Cows need feed," he stated. "I'm coming with you," Elara said suddenly. Silas raised an eyebrow. "In those boots?" He went to a closet and threw a pair of heavy, worn muck boots at her. "Put these on, and 2 pairs of socks." Stepping out into the aftermath of the storm was a revelation. The world was diamond bright. The sun reflected off the snow with blinding intensity. The air was so clean it tasted sweet. Elara tramped through the snow behind Silas, her legs burning from the effort. They reached the barn, and he began tossing hay bales. She tried to help. She grabbed a bale, but the twine dug into her soft hands, and the weight was shocking. She grunted, heaving it a few feet. Silas didn't mock her. He just watched. She gritted her teeth and dragged it to the feeder. She worked until she was sweating inside her coat, her muscles screaming. When they were done, she leaned against a fence post, panting. Silas looked at her, a hint of respect in his eyes. "Not bad for an architect," he drawled. "You've got some fight in you," Elara smiled, a genuine, tired smile. "I build skyscrapers, Silas. I know about structure and load-bearing." He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that made her stomach do a flip. "Yeah, well, hay bales don't come with blueprints." They stood there for a moment, the steam from the horses rising around them. The barrier between them, the wall of judgment and difference, was thinning. He reached out and brushed a piece of straw from her hair. His hand lingered for a fraction of a second too long near her cheek. Elara's breath hitched. His eyes searched hers, looking for something. "You're not what I expected," he murmured. "Neither are you," she whispered back. The moment was shattered by the distant, grinding sound of an engine, a snowplow. The world was coming back. The bubble was popping. Silas pulled his hand away, his expression closing off. "Sounds like the county plow. He'll be able to get out soon." The disappointment that washed over Elara was profound and confusing. She should be relieved. She could go back to her life. But the thought of her sterile apartment and her ringing phone suddenly felt exhausting. The plow cleared the main drive an hour later. A tow truck arrived for her car shortly after. The departure was awkward. Elara stood by the newly started car, her designer coat back on, the muck boots left by the door. Silas stood on the porch, his hands in his pockets. "Thank you," she said, feeling the inadequacy of the words. "For saving my life." Silas nodded once. "Drive safe, Elara. Watch out for ice." "I will." She waited, hoping he would say something else, hoping he would ask for her number or tell her to stay. But he just stood there, the stoic cowboy, guarding his heart like he guarded his herd. She got in the car and drove away. She watched him in the rearview mirror until he was just a speck against the white mountains. Back in Chicago, the noise was deafening. The sirens, the construction, the chatter in the office all felt like an assault on her senses. Elara sat in her glass-walled office, looking at the blueprints for the summit retreat. The lines looked sharp and aggressive now. She remembered Silas's words. "It's just scenery." Weeks passed. She went on dates with men in suits who talked about the stock market and wine pairings. She felt nothing. Her mind kept drifting back to a cabin smelling of wood smoke, to the ache in her muscles after moving hay, to the slate-gray eyes of a man who found comfort in silence. She realized with a jolt that she was homesick for a place that wasn't her home. She couldn't focus on the project. She started making changes. She altered the elevation to protect the migration paths. She reduced the footprint of the main lodge. She replaced the glass walls with local stone and timber to blend in rather than stand out. Her boss was furious. "You're cutting into the profit margins, Vance," he yelled. "I'm saving the soul of the place," she shot back. She knew she had to go back. Not for the project. For him. She didn't call, she just booked a flight. She drove the familiar winding road, her heart racing faster with every mile. The snow was melting now, revealing patches of brown earth and green shoots. Spring was coming to Wyoming. She pulled up to the ranch. Looked different without the blanket of snow, more rugged, more alive. She saw him by the corral, fixing a fence post. He was wearing a t-shirt now, his arms tan and muscular as he worked the wire. She stepped out of the truck. He heard the door close and turned around. He dropped the wire cutters. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then he started walking toward her. He didn't run, but his stride was long and purposeful. "You forgot something?" he asked as he got closer, his voice gruff but unable to hide the underlying emotion. Elara smiled, tears pricking her eyes. "I think I forgot my heart," she said softly. Silas stopped a foot away from her. He looked at her, really looked at her, searching for any sign that this was a game. "This isn't a vacation, Elara. This life, it's hard. It's dirt and blood and early mornings. It's not a weekend retreat." "I know," she said, stepping closer. "I redesigned the project, Silas. I changed it. I'm fighting the board to make it a conservation easement instead of a resort. I might lose my job." Silas's eyes widened slightly.
"You did that?"
She nodded. "Because you were right. Some things shouldn't be paved over." He reached out and took her hand, his calloused thumb tracing the soft skin of her palm. "And what about you? Are you city or are you country?" Elara looked up at the mountains, then back at him. "I'm an architect, Silas. I build things. And I think I want to build something here. With you." The wall he had built around himself crumbled. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. He smelled of sweat and horses and sagebrush, and to Elara it was the best smell in the world. He kissed her then, a kiss that tasted of longing and promise, a kiss that sealed the gap between their two worlds. "I missed you," he whispered against her lips. "Even the silence felt loud without you." Elara laughed, a sound that bubbled up from her chest. "I missed you too, Cowboy." They spent the next few months in a whirlwind of secrecy and stealing moments. Elara flew back and forth, finishing her work in Chicago, preparing to leave it all behind. It wasn't easy. Her friends thought she was crazy. Her family thought she was having a midlife crisis. But every time she landed in Jackson Hole and saw Silas waiting by his battered truck, she knew she was making the right choice. The climax came in the form of a town hall meeting. The developers were pushing hard for the original plan, threatening legal action against the zoning changes Elara had proposed. The town was divided. Ranchers versus business owners. Tradition versus money. Elara stood up in the back of the room. She walked to the microphone, her hands shaking. She saw Silas in the crowd, his hat in his hand, watching her with intense pride. "My name is Elara Vance," she spoke into the mic. "I designed this resort, and I'm here to tell you that it's a mistake." The room erupted in murmurs. She spoke for 10 minutes, outlining the environmental damage, the loss of heritage, the destruction of what made Wyoming special. "We don't need to conquer this land," she finished. looking directly at Silas. "We need to steward it. We need to be worthy of it." The vote was close, but the zoning board, swayed by the architect's own testimony, voted to restrict the development size and mandate the conservation corridors. It was a victory, hard-won and sweet. Elara lost her job the next day. She didn't care. She packed up her apartment in Chicago, selling her furniture, her sleek clothes, everything that didn't fit into a life on a ranch. She drove her own truck west this time, watching the skyline fade in her rearview mirror with zero regret. 1 year later, the sun was setting over the Tetons, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and fiery orange. Elara sat on the porch swing of the cabin, a mug of hot cider in her hands. She was wearing worn jeans and boots that were scuffed and muddy. Her hair was loose or windblown. The screen door creaked open, and Silas stepped out. He sat beside her, wrapping a heavy wool blanket around them both. He didn't say anything, just rested his arm around her shoulders, pulling her into his warmth. They watched the horses grazing in the lower pasture, their tails flicking in the twilight. "Regrets?" Silas asked quietly, watching the horizon. It was a question he asked her sometimes, when the winter was hard or the work was endless. Elara leaned her head on his shoulder. "Regret that I didn't get lost in that snowstorm sooner," she replied. Silas chuckled, kissing the top of her head. "You were never lost, Elara. You were just taking the long way home." They sat there as the stars began to poke through the canvas of the night sky. Millions of them, bright and unpolluted by city lights. They were two different people from two different worlds who had collided in a storm and found that they fit together perfectly in the calm. Elara looked at the ring on her finger. Simple gold with a small diamond, practical and beautiful. She looked at the man beside her, the man who had taught her the language of silence and the rhythm of the earth. She took a deep breath of the cool mountain air. Love, she realized, was a lot like the West. It was wild, it was dangerous, and it demanded everything you had. But if you were brave enough to ride it out, the view was worth every struggle. "Ready for tomorrow?" Silas asked, breaking her reverie. "We got fences to mend in the north pasture." Elara smiled, closing her eyes and listening to the beat of his heart. "I'm ready," she said, and she was. For the fences, for the snow, for the life they were building, one log, one day, one heartbeat at a time. The wind howled through the canyon again, but this time inside the cabin. The fire was warm, and neither of them was alone. They had built a fortress against the cold, not of stone and timber, but of shared dreams, and a love that was as enduring as the mountains themselves.